Hi there, BookTube. It's Ros, Skyly Dancing About the Book.
And Tilly from Tilly's Shelf.
And we're here for a joint Ros and Tilly
Victober video, yes.
As we do. And this is a new tag for Victober 2023.
And we're doing it on the first Tuesday of the month, so you've got plenty of time to plan for and get your tags in. 3
more Tuesdays, at least. And I say it's a new tag, but that's not strictly speaking true, is it, Tim?
It's an adjusted tag because we loved the previous version of the tag so much, and we just thought this could so easily be applied to Victorian literature as well. So last month in September it was Shaketember, which was a month-long read-along of Shakespearean works, hosted by Jason of Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Kelly of Books I'm Not Reading, and Nicole of A Day of Small Things. And they created the Shakespeare Journey Tag so that people could discuss how they had come to reading Shakespeare. And
we're doing the same.
Yeah, we thought the same applies for Victorian literature, you know.
And we got their permission, so...
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this time round, I'm going to interview you.
Yes.
And you'll see the questions and Ros's answers. And then later on, we might do it so that Ros interviews me.
That'd be right.
So, without further ado, this is the Victorian Literature Journey Tag for Victober. So question number 1, what was your first experience reading Victorian literature and what was it like?
Well, I read quite a lot of Victorian literature as a child, because my mother read me all her favourite books, and
so they passed down through the family.
Passed down, and so I think that my first experience of Victorian literature was Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter,
which makes sense. So that was 1901.
She self-published it in 1901, and then it was properly published in 1902, but she did publish it, and that was read to me when I was like a toddler. So yeah, that's as far back as you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to?
And then I kind of obviously started reading
proper Victorian novels. Victorian novels for grown-ups.
Grown-ups. Kind of around 11, 12.
Yeah,
I think they got us to read David Copperfield at school in the first year of secondary school. And I think it was an abridged version. And it's so irritating at school that they used to read them so slowly, and it used to drive me mad. So I'd go home and just read the rest of the book and got into it like that, and ran away with it in my teens.
I used to do that, and then I'd get into trouble because there would be a question like, "Oh, what do you think is going to happen next?" And I'd say, "Well, I think this is going to happen next."
Because you knew.
Because I've already read it. Yes. So I can sympathise with that.
Yeah. So, I really kind of got swept up in Victorian novels in my early teens in a big way. Yeah.
Question number 2 then. Has the reading of a Victorian book ever brought you to tears? If so, tell us more.
Well, I'm not a
tearful.
I'm not a tearful reader, but yes. And probably because I was much, much younger when I read it. And it's almost a cliche, but in Jane Eyre, when Jane's at the school, Lowood School, and her friend Helen Burns dies. The death of Helen Burns, I mean, you'd have to be a very hard-hearted human being not to
not to be sad,
not to be moistened at the eyes by that. So I'd say that would be that. Yeah, there probably others. But.
Yeah, and that happens, in case you haven't read Jane Eyre, that happens right at the beginning, so it's not a spoiler.
It's not a spoiler. I mean,
it's the first big emotional incident, really.
Yes, while she's still a child, and you get
the rest of her career.
Yeah, growing up.
So, question number 3. Are there any people that have played a significant role in your Victorian literature journey?
Yes, and I've sort of said it already. My mother, she really, because her parents were Victorians, she grew up, very much, Victorian books were
Victorian literature,
and because she was a young child in the 1920s, and they weren't old then, Victorian children. So she just read me loads, things like Kipling, the Just So stories, and many Nesbit, and so it was natural to graduate into reading adult Victorian.
Passed on from that.
But the other person I'd say has been really important in my Victorian literature journey is you.
Really?
How come? Well, because like I read loads of Victorian literature as like a child in my teens and so on,
as a young person,
and then I kind of stopped. I mean, not utterly, but I got caught up in contemporary fiction and
sort of moved away from classic.
Just moved away. But then having a sort of 12-year-old Matilda, Tilly, sort of getting all keen on Jane Eyre or Tessa, it was like, hey, I've got to reread these things, and I just got right back into it.
Pushed you back into it. Yeah, I can remember actually, and it's going to come up in my version of the tag, but starting to watch the BBC version of Jane Eyre, and you saying to me, well, you can read it, it's on the shelf,
Yes, exactly. There you go.
So, question number 4. Do you have a favourite film or TV adaptation of a Victorian book? And what about one you'd like to see made?
Okay, I do have enjoyed the BBC period sort of dramas that they used to make. Don't really do it anymore. They're too expensive to make, apparently. And the Bleak House from 2005 sort of stuck in my mind.
It's such a good story.
It's such a good story
that even with a little bit of, and they've got good actors in that series as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that I would like is I think Adam Bede by George Eliot has all the kind of melodrama and characters to make a really good sort of period drama series. And there was a film in 1992 and it was a bit rubbish.
Yeah, so it needs to be done better.
So I would love it. But I think the name Adam Bede doesn't sound like a kind of...
Yeah, and that's why people keep going back to Great Expectations. Yeah. People recognise that as a name of a Victorian book.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we've had too many Great Expectations. We can leave that now.
Leave it. Especially if you're going to completely screw it up like the last one.
I haven't actually seen the last one.
Well, so. Don't. Anyway, carry on.
Next question. Question number 5. Which character in Victorian literature do you most identify with?
Yeah. And I found this really hard.
It's a difficult question.
It's a really difficult, because like I'd say, when I was sort of 12 or something, I probably identified with Jane Eyre.
Yeah. Really
strongly. But now, Victorian, like women in particular, they're all a lot more pious than me, or more, or tragic things have, you don't want to identify with Tess, do you?
No, you really don't want to identify with Tess. But weirdly I did when I was a teenager, and that's why the story works, because you can kind of see how she gets into the situations that she gets into. And there's lots of Victorian women characters that I love, but I wouldn't claim her.
So I'm going to say Lady Bracknell from The Importance of Being Earnest.
Fantastic.
Because she's sort of a little bit over the top, and but she's trying her best to do the right thing.
What she sees as the right thing. She might be sometimes slightly blind to what the right thing is.
Yes, exactly.
And she's got, the best 2-word line in any
handbag. And she's sometimes a bit deluded, and the people around her are sometimes laughing at her a bit.
Oh, my poor mother.
And she has a past.
Oh, are you claiming a past?
So there we go.
Yeah. Lovely. Question number 6. Do you have a favourite moment or scene or line from Victorian literature that you would like to share?
Many, many, many. But when I thought about this, the scene that came to mind, that has stuck in my head ever since I read it, aged 12 or 13 or whatever, is chapter 47 of Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and it's when she's gone to work at this farm. It's quite a sort of harsh environment. This is after, well, I shouldn't. No spoilers. After a bad thing has happened to her.
Yeah.
and she's kind of been abandoned, and she's got to make her way in the world again, and she's working there, and it's the scene when the threshing machine comes. Now, this threshing machine is worked by a steam engine, and it travelled round the country, around the county,
from farm to farm.
So
you had to do all of your threshing on the day.
Exactly. When it came, it was like you had to try and get it all. And it's
there was no break. You had to.
Yeah, there's this juxtaposition of like kind of the new industrial kind of life of steam power with the agricultural world that perhaps had operated at a slower pace, and so that's the sort of dramatic setup. But then Tess is it's like it shows Tess's powerlessness, that she's sort of slave to this monstrous machine.
Yeah, and you get these vivid descriptions of the steam coming out, the redness of the machine. It's it's very much
it's
hell,
a red monster. It's all about hell and and all of that and being trapped, and then Alex d'Urberville turns up, and he's this figure standing at the edge of the field, and
no, I remember that scene so clearly myself, because it was a close reading scene when I was studying the D'Urbervilles. It was one of the ones that we had to be prepared to write about in an exam. But it's a great choice because there's so much.
Because it's both psychologically very real in its sort of detail, but it also works on a metaphorical level. So.
And it brings together a lot of the themes from the rest of the book, like what you were mentioning about the collision between the agricultural world and the new world.
Exactly. There we go. That's mine.
Wonderful. Good choice. Question number 7. I'm reading Rosa's handwriting and it's very difficult. Is there any part of Victorian literature that intimidates you? And if so, what and why? That could be an author, a work, or a genre aspect.
Yeah. I used to be quite intimidated by those really big, long Victorian poems, the sort of book length things. And I wouldn't have picked one up, and I'd have thought they weren't for me. And then just a few years ago, I read In Memoriam by Tennyson, and actually I discovered, this is all right now. Yeah. I can do this. So I read The Ring of the Book by Robert Browning the other year, and this year I've read Aurora Leigh by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and really loved Aurora Leigh's the best yet. So I feel like I've overcome something that definitely did intimidate me.
And there's nothing left? No remaining hurdles in Victorian literature?
No, I mean, there's I'm always a bit put off by something that's 1,000 pages long.
Aren't we all? Just looking at the way we live now, which is sat on our table.
But then that's a good example of why one shouldn't be intimidated by something like that, because actually it's very readable. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't read it yet, so I can't vouch for it. But question number 8: what tips would you give to someone early in their Victorian literature journey?
I would say, 2. One is you've got to find the pace. And I think that their expectation, they expected books to be, novels in particular, to be really engaging and exciting and keep you reading and all of that. But they expected you to be willing to get into it a little bit more slowly. And
they didn't expect you to have so many distractions.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think if you want to, if you sort of want to really enjoy, particularly a Victorian novel, you've just got to think, I've just got to give it a little bit of time.
Give it a few chapters.
Give it a few chapters, and then you'll be away.
And and be prepared for some bits that we might not get in a modern book, like a little bit of religious stuff that you just have to sort of read it and get into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're very like us, but they're also very different, and then
that's part of the joy.
That's part of the joy. And the other thing, my other tip would be to find the humour. And that not to expect actually that it's all going to be sort of
dull classics.
either pious or sort of romantic. Actually, there's all sorts of Victorian.
Yeah, I mean, I really love Victorian cynicism. Like almost all Victorian literature has got a little bit of biting humour to it. So just look out for it. Don't be thinking it's going to be all serious and severe because it's Victorian. Because they laugh like we do.
Yeah, and then there's like books that are like really just purely funny, like Three Men in a Boat or Farragut, or nonsense poetry, or Lewis Carroll, or there's a much more of a sense of fun.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've forgotten that was Victorian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question number 9 then, just thinking to finish up.
Yes.
What book or other work is your top recommended read for other readers of Victorian literature?
Okay, my top recommended read is kind of a genre, maybe, rather than a specific book, although I could suggest specifics, and that is read a play.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I've really enjoyed reading Victorian plays.
Yeah.
And you get everything from Victorian literature just distilled down
into something kind of
that you can read in an afternoon.
Yes, exactly. The importance of being earnest, Lady Bracknell earlier, but any of Wilde's plays, lots of things by Shaw.
Yeah. I mean, we're reading Mrs. Warren's Professions. We'll be doing a discussion video of that in the coming days. And that's a fantastic play for humour, but also for addressing like some really strong social movements and ideas at the time.
Absolutely, Pygmalions and other. So, read a play. That's all our questions.
So finally, question number 10, tag people.
Tag people, and this is a tag, as I say, for Victober 2023. If you're involved in Victober 2023 in any way whatsoever, why not do this tag and share your journey with us?
And you are, of course, one of the hosts of Victober. So we just quickly should mention all the hosts.
Yes. Katie, Kate,
Marissa, and you. Yes.
There you go. And if you want Tilda's answers to these questions, you have to go and watch the version of this tag on her channel, which will be up soon.
Yes, might be later, but soon.
Yeah, soon.
Thanks for watching. Bye.